everyone. Today we are painting a basic bird, and I'm doing this in oil paint, but this could just as easily be done with acrylic paints. So I'm starting here with a gesso board by Ampersand, and it's an 1/8 inch thick pre-gessoed panel, and I've already put on a thin layer of blue paint, and you want to, if you do that, you want to make sure it's completely dry before you go ahead and paint on it, and then also that it's not too dark. You want to be able to see what you're drawing, and usually for underpaintings you don't want the value to be too dark because paintings tend to actually darken even further as they dry and age. So we're going to start with bunch of oil paints here. I have manganese blue. I usually start on my palette from light to dark. So I have a titanium white, a zinc white, a cadmium yellow, cadmium red, and a transparent vermilion red. I've got two blues, manganese and ultramarine, and this is a green gold, which is transparent. So I'm also going to show you some examples of glazing. And glazes are done with the transparent paints usually. So this is transparent earth orange, and I'm going back and putting my blues on now. These are all different brands. I've got Holbein blocks, Williamsburg, which is an American brand, and I think maybe Mussini by Schmink, which is a German brand. So we've got all kinds of things going on. This is Payne's Gray, and Payne's Gray is not always the darkest. Williamsburg makes an even darker gray, which is I like for really dark blacks. And so we're going to go ahead and get started here with some alizarin crimson that I've watered down. Now I have two brushes here. I have a sable brush, a sable flat brush, and a bristle brush. And the bristle brush is, you can see it's kind of splayed out and worn out, but it's nice for drawing because it's kind of stiff. And so sometimes if a paintbrush is kind of used and stiff on the ends, it's actually, instead of throwing it away, I keep some of those for actually things like this, for like sketching on my painting. All right, so this is something that comes very quickly for me, but basically it's just shapes, and then you can pose the shapes how you would like. Look at some pictures of birds online if you need to see kind of the anatomy of how a bird would sit and pose, but don't copy someone else's photograph unless it's in the public domain. So what we're going to do today is a bluebird, but you could paint so many different songbirds. Pretty much are similar. Some have different beaks depending on if it's like if they eat seeds. A lot of times they'll have a chunkier beak, like a cardinal, that is good for cracking open seeds. And then some songbirds, have really long beaks, like the kingfisher, because they actually are fishing, or like, or a woodpecker, which is like sticking his beak inside of the bark and holes to actually grab his food. So yeah, just there's a little bit of differences, but so many of the songbirds especially have the same kind of fat bodies, which are basically like a round or square body with a tail and then a head on top. And if the beak is to the side, it's usually like a stretched out triangle, and then if it's facing forward, or what we'd say in ballet en face, is so its head's facing you straight on, then it's kind of like a diamond shaped beak a lot of times. And then again, it just depends, the size depends on what type of bird it is. So again, this is the eastern bluebird, so it's going to have a kind of a rusty red brush, or a breast. But if it were a mountain bluebird, it would have a blue breast, because the mountain bluebirds all blue. Okay, so this is the eastern bluebird. So I'm just mixing, and I know you can't see all the mixes I do, especially with the lighter colors, but if I lighten it at all, I just use the zinc white because the titanium white's way too potent. It just but the zinc white's nice because you can lighten the without diluting the colors as much. I use the titanium white more for highlights and when I want to really brighten up and dilute the color. So we're going to add a green here for the leaf, which is just a mixture of blue and cadmium yellow. And now I use transparents for glazing, and what you'll do is you'll really add a lot of oil to them because they're going to go over the top, and they need to be able to be runny enough. The viscosity needs to be fluid enough that it can glaze over the top of already wet paint without pushing it around or scraping it. And then also, because you put fat over lean paint, if you know anything about that. If I don't have a video on that, if I do, I'll put a link, but if not, there's other videos on fat over lean. You can just even Google that because you want to have fatter layers, meaning more oil in them, over leaner layers. So here I'm actually going to add the titanium to this to make the background. And as you'll see, see how it really diluted that color and really brightened it as far as the value. So I'm going to use this for the background. And I just start with some really bold and loose brush strokes and kind of, for the most part, staying away from the bird so I'm not messing him up. But sometimes I'll do kind of a controlled stroke that kind of bleeds, like you can see on the tail, it kind of bleeds into the bird. You just need to have a little bit of control if you do that, but I do kind of like some of the edges merging together, so to speak, and then keep some sharp edges and some that are blended or kind of merging together. So I try to keep the value of the background quite a bit lighter than most of the bird and the leaf, just so that you can see them better and they stand out. Even if you were like far away from the painting, you'd be able to tell what this is. Okay, so around the beak, I am always going away from the beak so that it keeps that nice point. If there's something that disappears as you're painting the background, you can go over it again with more paint. So like I will go over the leaf again because the leaf is starting to disappear as I paint the background. So for the final strokes, often take some of my background paint and blend it into the colors of the subject so that it's just kind of tying the whole thing together. And these are going to be like forward strokes or the planes that would be closest to the eye, so that it just kind of gives it some dimension, some more dimension. All right, so you don't want to do the whole background with the same color. So I slightly mix up some of you could. This is just something I do to add some interest to the background so it's just not so boring and static. So yeah, as you can see now, it looks a little more blue and gray and cool because I added the ultramarine to it. Now this is, I can't tell what I'm doing, but I think I'm mixing the transparent yellow with lots of fat linseed oil because I'm going to do a couple strokes of the transparent vermilion over the top. Okay, yeah, here's where we're doing some final strokes to the background. And as you can see on the left side of this painting, I just leave the exposed blue, and it's kind of nice to have some of that showing through sometimes. All right, that's the transparent, the vermilion I was talking about. We're going to do another stroke right here. And you'll be able to see it better when I turn the light off. It's kind of glaring, so you can't really get the effect as much as I'd like. So if you stay to the end, I'll take a photo of it and it'll look better. It won't have all that glare. We're going to go ahead and go over the branch again with the transparent earth orange and maybe a little of the Payne's gray, because and I'm using my stiff brush, which kind of scratches and gives it a lot of texture as well. And it's okay that I redid the branch, but I'm going to go over the leaf again and also with a glaze. So I'm going to take that transparent gold green and make a glaze to go over the leaf. Here I'm trying to mix up some black for the eyes and the beak and the feet. And right now I'm just using the Payne's gray and the transparent, but because this brand of Payne's gray by Block isn't very dark, I decided to go back with some of the Williamsburg ultramarines. And I have to say, I do recommend Williamsburg for really dark Payne's gray and ultramarine blue. All right, I really like how pretty much all of the sketching I did with the alizarin crimson is covered up, but there's still a few peaks of it left bleeding through in areas, but for the most part, it's completely covered. And here's where I'm talking about, this is a great, the size and location of the eye I'm happy with, but I feel like it's just not dark enough, so I go back with some ultramarine and I'm going to add that to this mixture, and it just really darkens it so the eye will look a lot darker. There's also again some glare from the light I have on the left side of my table, so when I take a photo you'll be able to see the difference. All right, I'm putting little highlights on the feet, and not too bright of highlights. I don't go any dark or lighter than the background color. But for the eye, I will make a brighter highlight. So I'll add some more titanium and make a really thick highlight, usually with the background color. So I'm cleaning up the area around the glaze. This is the transparent gold green, and I just want to make sure that none of the white gets mixed in with it because that would turn it opaque, and I want to keep it very transparent. So I'm adding tons of linseed oil here. I don't add any thinner because this is going to go over the top. We want it really fat. So just one stroke, that's all, but it adds that luminosity, and then you can see underneath it. It just gives it a little bit of interest. I even just sprinkled it on there and gave the bird a beauty mark next to his eye. A green beauty mark, but still, it just is a fun thing to do sometimes. It's okay to be a little playful with your paintings. All right, and here's what I'm talking about, adding the titanium white to make a really thick highlight for the eye, like the really shiniest parts. So the eye, I'm gonna put a little dot on his beak and a little tiny touch on the white of his belly. Not too much on the belly because this is the highlight, this is the brightest brights, and I don't want to go overboard with it. So try to always edit and go, try to it's kind of trial and error because art is always subjective, but usually it's best to edit and add more, like if you feel like you need it after the first try, if that makes sense. Okay, so we're done. I hope you enjoyed this video, And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments.